Hi everybody, welcome to our live video. So today we're going out on a few different channels. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter today. So I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Helen, as you can probably see on the screen, the unlikely genius. We're going to talk about what that is in a minute. What I'd say to anyone watching, if you do have any questions as we go through or any comments, please feel free to put them in the relevant tabs or in the comment box. I'm sure we'll try and cover as many of them as we can. I know quite a number of people do watch this quite often after the live show, so again, feel free to put the comments in there, and I'm sure Helen would be happy to answer anything afterwards as well. So we can do that, and I can pass it on to Helen if needed. Without further ado, I'll hand you over to Helen. If you could just kind of explain who you are and what you do, Helen, and then we'll jump into some questions and find a bit more detail.
Yeah, so as I say, I'm Helen Hill, also known as Unlikely Genius. So that's my business name. And I'm a freelance learning and content designer. So what this means is I basically take companies' content, which might already exist as in face-to-face training, and turn it into digital learning, or we might be starting from scratch. And the content side of it is about reviewing e-learning, but also other aspects of content. So it might be things like people's website or their promotional materials, looking at how they're talking to their audience and the flow of it and things like that. So I've worked for myself for 2 years now, although I have actually been freelance on the side for 15 years on the side of a full-time job. But 2 years ago, I made the leap to work for myself full-time.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Helen. So, I mean, what we're going to kind of generally talk about today is kind of how people engage with digital learning, because I know it's a big subject area. But first, I'd kind of like just find out a bit of kind of context to that. I guess we all know what the situation in the world has been the last 6 or 7 months, and I think just generally we've gone from a more, should we say, more remote, video-based way of working. So how's all that been for you, and kind of what's been the effect on what you do in the last 6 months or so?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. I mean, right at the start, when the pandemic hit in March, one of my main customers, which is actually an e-learning company in Finland, one of their main customers that I was working for, put the project on hold till 2021, sorry. So I did have that initial eek, I'm going to have to go and find more work. I mean, I do generally work on multiple clients at a time, so luckily I still had a bit in the background, but I did have a moment of panic. But then suddenly, the e-learning world started to right itself. The initial panic kind of calmed down in a lot of companies, and they realized that actually they're going to have to do something to get online. So suddenly, there was an absolute boom. And I've been busy ever since. So there was an initial maybe a week of panic. But now I think I am actually busier than ever. So it's just that I'm in the right industry at the moment. But also I think a lot of companies are realizing that it's not just about reacting to the current situation. Having digital learning is the way forward for the future. It's going to future-proof their business. It's going to free up time for a lot of people in HR and onboarding and all that kind of thing. So there's been a really, really great response actually to companies just wanting to find out about it and get online, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a discussion where probably a lot of people's had around things like Zoom and various kind of video meeting areas. So that's kind of a conversation we all kind of know. We probably all accept that even when normality resumes, there's probably going to be a shift where there's going to be a lot less traveling, quite frankly, and a lot less face-to-face, even in normal world. And I guess it's just the same in your world as well.
Yeah, and I think, for a long time, I think a lot of people just haven't realised the benefits of e-learning and the fact that it can free up a lot of people's time because the learners can do it asynchronously without you having to run the sessions. There is less travelling, there's less cost of booking locations. And also you can reach a wider audience. So if you're a company that's not doing internal training, but something external, you can reach people worldwide with it rather than having to try and get everyone to London for the same event on the same day. And it's fitting around people's lives better because, at the end of the day, everyone's homeschooling and all the rest of it at the moment, and life is just chaotic. But asynchronous learning, where they're doing it in their own time, is fitting into people's lives a lot better than having to be in a classroom or in a conference room at this time to do it for 2 hours, 7 hours, whatever it might be. And I think that's finally being understood, really.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So obviously we're going to talk about kind of how you engage people, but I guess probably just before that is, how important is it that people do get engaged by digital learning?
Yeah, I think the difficult thing is that e-learning has got a bad reputation because, it has been around for a while, a good 20, 25 years. And it's got that stereotype attached to it of, are you just sitting at a computer just clicking through information because you have to do it and you're bored and you get to the end and think, right, I've ticked a box, I've done it, like file that away till I have to do it again next year. But there is a shift, and some people are still doing it that way, and especially a lot of the compulsory learning, but there's so much more technology available now to make things engaging, to add storytelling into your courses, to get learners interacting together rather than just sitting on a screen, behind a screen themselves, getting them to contribute to discussion boards and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I've just seen a comment about blended learning's popped up, and that is the huge thing now, of running synchronous and asynchronous sessions, doing some digital, doing some face-to-face, getting learners to be responsible for their own development. So giving them starting points to go off and actually do things for themselves and to contribute with other learners. And to create communities, I think, is a big thing now, to create like a network of learners, where, particularly because when you think a lot of the universities are having to now shift online, even, that's such a massive culture change for them. And they're really going to have to build these online communities where their learners have to engage and show their development, show their learning. So there's so much more opportunity now. And I mean, it's when you think the future is going to be AI, VR, and all that kind of thing, which still blows my mind, a lot of it. And that's something I've not delved into massively at all. That's going to blow people's minds when we get to that level. But we're just in that middle transition phase of trying to get rid of the old flash courses. They're now not supported anymore, so they're going to have to go to take these more inventive methods on, really. And like you said, just get people interacting, get them engaged in all different ways.
Yeah, no, thank you, Oliver, for the comment as well about blended learning, and like I kind of hinted at with the advent of Zoom and things like that. I think people are more used to doing things behind a screen now, and it was always seen, quite frankly, as a second-class citizen, I think. So having done a job where I spent a lot of my time in my car going around doing meetings all around the UK, I know how much time I kind of waste on that. And if you ever suggested doing a video call with someone, it was a bit of an insult, really. And I guess learning is no different. The from going in a classroom environment to doing it online is, I'm sure, it was probably seen as a cheaper, less effective alternative when it doesn't necessarily have to be.
No, not at all. And I mean, the big thing I've been trying to battle with explaining to a lot of people during the pandemic is that taking a PowerPoint and whacking that online is not e-learning. And in the same way, just doing what you normally would have done in a conference room in front of a camera now for 7 hours on Zoom is not particularly e-learning. That's online facilitation, really. You're just teaching in front of a camera. So you've got to bring in, to make it proper e-learning, you've got to bring in those blended approaches of, you might still have a Zoom session for an hour on Friday, and maybe you've got an asynchronous course that the learners have to do in their own time, Monday to Thursday, and submit something to a discussion board or a forum or a piece of work to you, whatever it might be. And then you consolidate that learning in that live session, and you check their understanding in the way you normally would. So it is just trying to get people's perception of e-learning at the moment and shift that a little bit away from, I've got a slide deck, I can just pop that on something and it'll be fine. That there's so much context that needs adding to that you would normally add as a trainer face to face.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was going to ask you about the misconceptions around the whole e-learning, digital learning world. And I guess kind of the second part of that question would be about what things is there available that you can be done that probably people don't expect. When you were talking earlier about clicking through and doing a little quiz at the end and that kind of thing. It's like a flashback to me from a previous role, and it was ticking a box. So I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that. So, do you want to kind of explain, like I said, maybe misconceptions, but also what can be done that people don't expect?
Yeah, and I think the big shift from that old stereotype of just clicking through is about the interaction and the engagement. And I think there's a much bigger understanding now of the fact that the best e-learning, like with any branding, contains a story. So you've got to take the learners on that journey. Start with your clear aim and think how you can deliver that in a different way. So like a lot of the work I'm doing at the moment is things like branch scenarios, where a learner will go in, be presented with a question, and they can go down lots of different routes. And you can even let them get to the end making the wrong decisions and make them reflect on why they've done that wrong, take them back to the beginning, and they've got to find the right path. Instead of just present the information, make them work through and ask them a multiple choice question. That's so passive. And that's the big shift now, that is trying to get that learning to be active. So yeah, loads of, like, a lot of the companies that I'm working with at the moment, I say companies, they're mostly like charities and local authorities, and I've got a project with the NHS. They're bringing in apps like Padlet, which are things where you can then prompt the learners to go off and contribute to like a board with like post-its and things like that on. They can brainstorm together. And it's just bringing those integrations in, which it's not always possible because a lot of them do involve a license fee. But a lot of the educational organisations actually already have them, and they've just not been using them. So to now build that into, they've got Moodle for their learning management platform, have some modules on there, but then also have these links out to things like Padlet and what is it called, Big Blue Spot or something, which is like a meeting software. Okay. So they can go off and chat in there. So it's just about bringing in the active learning, making sure that the learners are looking at the content and actually thinking about it and processing it and applying it to their life. That's a huge part of adult learning theory, is making sure that learners can apply it to their life. So not, they've got to understand why they're doing it. So explain that really clearly at the beginning, make it really relevant to them, make them understand why they have to do this health and safety training. It's everyone's responsibility. If you don't do it, your workmate may be falling down the stairs or whatever it might be, or getting electrocuted. You've got to make some kind of story in there that makes them think, rather than just make sure nothing's on the floor and click through it, so that's the huge thing really now.
Absolutely. I mean, we kind of, you touched on it there about the kind of the bad examples of what e-learning can be, and quite frankly, we describe it, they might as well just have it as a PDF or as a book rather than an e-learning. You're just doing it for that. So is there any other kind of other things, examples of bad versions that you've come across?
Well, I mean, I've done many myself over time. I've had to work in many, especially when I was in teaching. I had to do loads on fire extinguishers and stuff. And I can't tell you to this day what that was even about. And it actually got to the point where a group of us sat in a room together, just passively clicked on it while we were having a meeting. And then it got to the end quiz, and one person would do it and just share the answers. And that's the kind of learning that just shows there is absolutely no engagement or understanding whatsoever that is going into that. And we as teachers, obviously we get excited about learning, but even that just didn't, there was nothing at all to spark anything off there. And the funny thing is actually that when we shared the answers, the questions all randomized, so we all got it wrong and failed anyway. Quick learning curve there. Yeah. So yeah, it's just things like that I've done many over my time, and like I say, I've had to build the odd one, because sometimes somebody's paying you to do a job, and if that's what they want, and they're not gonna take your advice on board, you've just got to do it.
I guess the key thing to that though then is the culture of the business, isn't it? Is that you kind of mentioned how the learner understands why they're doing it, which can be done within the digital platform, but actually that mainly needs to be done outside. The business itself needs to be able to have a culture that people understand, and maybe continuous
Yeah.
learning and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually listened to a webinar the other day about learning culture and how it's almost like with the whole mental health thing at the moment, people are paying lip service to it and saying, oh yeah, we're a learning company, we encourage people to take CPD and things, but then actually when it gets down to the bones of it, the staff don't feel like they can, or they don't get the funding for it, they don't get the time, they have to do it in their own time. And there's a lot of factors that are influencing these learning cultures, that it is more than just presenting a course to your staff, you know. And yeah, as you say, otherwise give them a PDF, you know, or something else to read. It'll be cheaper and it'll be quicker. But if you can create a real learning experience which actually makes someone think and gets them engaged in it and gets them talking about it in the company, it's worth the money, and they're going to remember it more than having a piece of paper on the desk that they're just going to ignore and shove in a letter tray like I used to do. Always done that. Yeah. So yeah, it's a much broader thing, really, the learning culture, and there are some companies doing it fantastically, and I think it does depend a lot on the people at the top and how much they value it, or whether they just see learning and onboarding and things like that as a tick exercise, because that's one of the biggest areas on onboarding that can be done so badly. You know, people joining a company and being told to just sit through 15 hours of CPD with just a click-through course, or given, as I have in the past, given a lever arch file and told just read that. That's not the best way to get someone excited to be working at your company, to feel like they're part of the team, to feel that they understand your processes. So that's a big area that could do with a lot of development, I think. And I think we'll be seeing that now, because people can't do the face-to-face onboarding at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned kind of the onboarding piece, and it's something we've talked about before. Is as well as employee onboarding, but customer onboarding as well. As the potential for that, isn't there, within this area? It's a way of making sure everyone has the same or very similar experience of coming to within your business, and whatever that means, everyone will be obviously different, but there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, your learning is part of your brand. It should still have the brand continuity with your tone of voice, with your actual visual branding. And I think that's something that people have got to understand as well, that, yeah, when you've got a new member of staff, they might have to wear your uniform or whatever as well, and they're going to meet various staff and be taken to meetings. But this onboarding process should be a part of your brand and should really introduce them to your ethos, and you've got to then adapt your whole brand for that. And I think the tone of voice is a big area that sometimes can be forgotten about with e-learning, and people can feel like they have to write e-learning as if it's a textbook, so really formal, full of the jargon, just straight to the point, and it's like a textbook on screen, when actually, you know, you should really embrace at that point, as I was saying before, telling the story of your company, telling the story of your customers, your workforce, and building, I suppose it's all to do with building into your values and your ethos and stuff as well. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So I'd be really interested, Helen. So if someone comes to you and says, right, Helen, we want digital learning, we want to use this to help engage our employees, etc. What are the kind of steps and processes, I guess, you go through with them, but then you go through yourself to kind of get to the end point of, here you go, here's the learning.
Yeah,
I appreciate everything will be different. I appreciate there won't be one exact, but just to kind of give a flavour of what that looks like.
Yeah, it can be quite a long process, and I think that's something that is often not understood when people go into an e-learning project, that just to produce a 1 hour module, you're talking usually about 8 weeks from start to end, if you follow the full process. So yes, there are different levels of processes, and I'll get to one of them in a minute, but generally you have to start out with scoping meetings, like you do with any project. You need to talk about who your target audience are, what content you've got ready, who's going to be involved in the process, what needs outsourcing, what are the timescales, what are the budgets. All that stuff needs to be pulled together, like in any project management. And ideally then a brief would be produced for the designer or designers, because quite often you will have an instructional designer who writes the course, and you will have a graphic designer that does the design. And then one of the two will do the build, or you might even have a third person to do that. And I actually do the full process, which does help with our projects quite a lot. And so it cuts down the timescales and the budget and things. But going from that, the customer then needs to pull the content together and provide it to you. So that can take a variety of length of time, depending on whether it's being done from scratch, or whether they've just got some face-to-face training they need to convert. That can take anything from a day to weeks for them to pull together. And they would then send it over, and the instructional designer, creates a storyboard. So usually in PowerPoint, but it can be done in other documents, in other software. And that's basically laying out your information. So giving you an idea of how the whole navigation and the layout is going to work. If you're going to have narration, that would be written in the notes at the bottom. It would give you ideas of what might appear on screen, and also things like tips as to what might be animated, and things like transitions and effects and things.
Yeah. And
then from that point, it becomes a back and forth of customer reviews it, sends it back, approves. And then the designer and builder, or if it's the same person, would start then to build it, and you go through typically 2 or 3 rounds of presenting the module. They review it, send it you back, and each time they should get less amends. Not always, but they should. So by about the 3rd time, you'd get to what we call like a gold module, where it's basically been passed, it's ready for the narration to be recorded, and that will be dropped in, and you might have a final check at the end. And that's when it would then go on to the learning management system, and obviously be sent out into the wide world or marketed, whatever you need to do with it. However, there is a rapid process, which is something I'm actually doing at the moment with an NHS project, where because the timescales are so tight, because I spent a year for them developing materials for their face-to-face training. We finished in January, COVID hit in March. So now we're turning all that into e-learning, and we've got to do it quick. So we're taking what's called the rapid development approach, where you basically miss out the storyboarding phase. So I'm going straight from their materials, their face-to-face materials, and I'm turning that into digital learning and building it and designing it straight away. And I send it for review. They generally do 1 review all together in a room, send it me back, and then there might be a couple more tweaks, but then it's got to be launched, because generally we've had about 2 weeks from start to finish for each module with this one. So it just really cuts down the process, and you can get away with it sometimes. Sometimes you just couldn't use that process if the materials are all sort of, from scratch, and there's more people involved. It would have been difficult as well. And we're also not including things like narration in it just because of timescales. So it just gives you an idea of, yes, you can do it in 2 weeks, but you're going to have to skip some steps and maybe not be as picky with certain things. There is the odd error, and we're just going to have to deal with it and get it on board. But then, if you're going to do the full process, you're looking at anything up to about 8 weeks for 1 module.
Right, fine. I understand that. But I guess it's like anything with this. If once it's done once, it's then can be used hundreds, thousands, millions of times if needed, which is a great use of resource rather than a person going around doing training courses. Overall, it's huge time saver.
And what I've also done to speed up the process with the NHS one is I've used a templated approach. So right at the beginning, when I did a look and feel for them, I missed that step out of the process. Creating a look and feel, like a mock-up of how it's going to look. I created some templates that I can then just keep using for some of the pages and things as well, and that just speeds it up fantastically. And they're going for a very blended approach. So like I was saying before, if the module's released on the Monday, they have a call usually on the Friday or the following Tuesday, and they've got to have done it by then to discuss what was in the course. And we've got a test group who are going through it literally as I'm building it. And it's working really well. They're really responding to it, especially because they're a company that haven't done anything like this before, and they're very excited about it, which is really nice.
Go on, sorry.
No,
No, sorry. I know you've mentioned NHS is a typical example of someone you work with. Is kind of what other types of businesses do you find that this is really useful for?
Yeah, I have two main types of customers. One is the learning companies who need extra resource. So I have a couple of kind of rolling contracts where they can literally just say to me, are you free next week to help out with XYZ? And either I can or I can't. And so that's where I tend to be an extra member of a team. And then the other side is things like the NHS project, and I've just finished for the Frontline, who train social workers. They're companies that either don't have an inbuilt learning team or have a very small one, and they hire me in as a consultant to advise how they should be doing things, and to then write, build, develop the courses. And there's quite a difference in the work sometimes. So it's a really interesting combination for me, from people, like I said, the Frontline and NHS it's been really nice because they haven't had much experience about e-learning, so they've got quite excited and they've been really appreciative, and they've really got into like all the courses that have been built, and you can really see your progress with those customers. It's really nice. And then the other side for the e-learning companies tends to be really big corporate clients. So I've been writing about things like finance and 5G and things like that, which is a total different side to obviously anything in the health and social care world. But they're my main customers, really.
Absolutely. So one of the questions I generally finish with this question for anyone is, as you know, collaboration is kind of key to what I talk about a lot. So who are the type of businesses or types of people that you would find as kind of really useful collaboration partners for you?
Yeah, I think as my business grows, and it's getting obviously very busy at the moment, I think there's a lot of collaboration to be done in terms of people I could outsource to as well, whether that's actual people to help with the writing, or even things like proofreading and checking through my work, helping me improve my processes and things like that. So that's going to be a big thing that I'm going to need to collaborate with people, just from my business sense, my business perspective. But then also, if there's people out there who do face-to-face training and are thinking either it could be done better, it could be moved online to save them some time, to save them some money, to future-proof their business at the moment, because obviously that's a big thing I'm trying to help people do. That I can help those either by in a consultancy way of just helping give them some ideas of how they can move it online, or they can obviously hire me to help them out as well. But yeah, and it's one thing I've been trying to really do at the moment, helping those companies, particularly smaller ones, who they can't necessarily afford to outsource to a designer like me to do things for them and pay for things like learning management systems and all that kind of complicated side. So I've actually been trying to find ways of helping them do it themselves, and I've written a course to help people so that they can literally go through the learning process in this course to create their own, which was bizarre, writing a course about writing a course, but it's on my website, really. And just lots of resources. So on my website, if anyone is looking at moving training online, I've got loads of free resources on my website. There's actually one about the e-learning process as well that we were talking about before, to give more information on that. So they can use those and share them and do whatever they want with them, really. So it's just anyone that wants to either get some ideas, get online, or help unravel my brain.
Brilliant, thank you, Helen. And just one final one for me. So if people do want to get a hold of you, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn, so you can find me on there, and it's literally LinkedIn/IN/Helen Hill. Or if you search my name, it should come up, and it comes up as Helen Unlikely Genius anyway, so you can't miss me. I am on Twitter, trying to use that more and understand how it works. And obviously in the Northern Affinity network, you can grab me in there.
Yes,
I should say, unlikeliGenius.com. Just go on there, and there's all kinds of ways to get in touch with me on there.
Fantastic, Helen. And if anyone, for whatever reason, can't, I'm sure you'll be able to find Helen. But if you can, do let me know, and we'll put you in touch. But No, thank you very much, Helen. I think it's a really, really interesting thing that you do, and I think obviously such a great industry to be in right now, and I'm sure will continue to be for the future. So thank you very much for your time. I'm sure people found this really useful. Like I said, anyone watching this back later, got any questions for Helen, please let either of us know. I'm sure we'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, Helen.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.